Hello,
The
everyone.
burnt
If you
bird.
enjoy my channel, please
Imagine
support me with
this.
one like,
You have
one
spent
subscribe,
3
and one
days
share.
preparing for the most important meal of your life. You have watched videos. You have read recipes. You have called your mother-in-law 3 times to confirm the oven temperature. You have woken up at 5 a.m. on a cold November morning, your hands shaking from a mixture of caffeine and pure terror. You have wrestled with a raw turkey the size of a small dog. You have stuffed it, buttered it, seasoned it, and whispered a tiny prayer over it. You have placed it in the oven with the reverence of a priest placing a holy object on an altar. And then, 4 hours later, you open that oven door, and what do you see? A bird. A black, charred, smoking, crispy into oblivion bird. The skin is not golden brown. It is the color of asphalt. The legs are not juicy and plump. They are shriveled like tiny dinosaur claws. Smoke billows out like you have just opened the gates of hell. Your husband's family is sitting in the dining room. They have traveled for hours. They are hungry. They are smiling. They are waiting for a Thanksgiving miracle. And you have just produced a turkey that looks like it survived a house fire. That was my first Thanksgiving as an American wife. That was the moment I stood in front of a smoking oven, holding a roasting pan that felt like it contained the ashes of my dignity. And I asked myself the question that would haunt me for weeks. What have I done? But here's the thing about that story. That burnt turkey, that terrible, horrible, no good, very bad turkey, turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because it tasted good. It didn't. Not because anyone pretended it was delicious. They didn't. But because that blackened bird taught me something about love that no perfect meal ever could. And if you are watching this video, if you have ever felt like a failure, like you don't belong, like your imperfect English, or your imperfect cooking, or your imperfect everything is a reason to hide, stay with me. Because this story is for you. Let me take you back to the beginning. The beginning of my American Thanksgiving journey. The beginning of my relationship with a family that was nothing like mine. The beginning of the lesson that would change how I see love, failure, and the beautiful mess of being human. My mother-in-law, Carol, is a wonderful woman. She is the kind of American mom who bakes cookies from scratch, who knows everyone's birthday, who sends handwritten thank you notes, and means every word. She is also, I discovered, a legendary Thanksgiving cook. For 30 years, she had made the turkey. The perfect turkey. Golden. Juicy. Flavorful. The kind of turkey that makes people close their eyes and sigh with happiness. The kind of turkey that becomes a family legend. But that year, Carol had decided to pass the torch. She was getting older. Her knees hurt. And she wanted to see her new daughter-in-law, me, take over the tradition. You'll do great, she said, handing me a faded recipe card that looked older than I was. Just follow the instructions. It's simple. Simple. She said it was simple. Have you ever noticed that the people who are really good at something always say it's simple? Oh, it's easy, they say. Just a few steps. Meanwhile, you are standing in a kitchen that looks like a bomb went off. Covered in flour and butter, and the existential dread of someone who has never cooked a bird bigger than a chicken. I had been in America for just a few years. My English was good enough for daily life, but culinary vocabulary? That was a whole different universe. Based. What does that mean? Truss. Is that a verb or a noun? Giblets. I don't want to know. I nodded and smiled and pretended I understood everything. Because that is what we do, right? When we are new. When we are afraid of looking stupid. We nod. We smile. We pretend. And then we go home and Google everything in our native language. I studied that recipe card like it was a sacred text. I memorized every temperature, every measurement, every cryptic instruction.
You watched YouTube videos.
I practiced on a small chicken a week before. I felt ready. I felt prepared. I felt like a Thanksgiving champion. And then the day came. The turkey, which I had ordered from a specialty store because I was too scared to pick one at the supermarket, arrived in a plastic bag, cold and raw and enormous. It was 12 pounds. 12 pounds of responsibility. 12 pounds of potential humiliation. I picked it up. It was heavier than my baby. I put it in the sink. I stared at it. The turkey stared back. Or, at least, I imagined it did. Because in my head, that turkey was mocking me. You can't do this, it seemed to say. You're not American enough. You're not good enough. You're going to ruin everything. That voice in my head, the voice of fear, had been my constant companion since I arrived in the United States. It whispered to me on the subway. It whispered to me at work. It whispered to me in the grocery store. And now it was whispering to me in my own kitchen, in front of a raw turkey, on the most important food holiday of the American year. I should have stopped. I should have called Carol. I should have admitted that I was terrified. But I didn't. I was too proud, too ashamed, too convinced that asking for help was a sign of failure. So, I followed the recipe. I rubbed butter all over the turkey. I stuffed it with herbs and onions. I put it in the roasting pan. And I slid it into the oven with the confidence of someone who has absolutely no idea what they're doing. Then I closed the door. I set the timer. And I walked away. For 4 hours, I did everything a good hostess should do. I set the table. I arranged the flowers. I made small talk with my in-laws. I refilled glasses. I smiled. I laughed. I pretended that everything was under control. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, a small tragedy was unfolding. The turkey was burning. Slowly. Quietly. Inexorably. And I had no idea. Because I had set the oven too high. Because I had misread the temperature. Because I had been so nervous that I had confused 325 with 425. A tiny mistake. One tiny, innocent, understandable mistake. And it had turned my beautiful bird into a charred disaster. The timer went off. I walked to the oven. I opened the door. And smoke poured out like the voice of God. I stood there, frozen, holding the roasting pan, watching the blackened creature on my kitchen counter. My hands were shaking. My eyes were burning. Not from the smoke. From the tears that were starting to form.
No, i whisperat. No, no, no.
And in that moment, I was not a grown woman with a husband and a child and a life in America. I was the girl who couldn't answer the immigration officer at JFK. I was the girl who said bitch instead of beach in English class. I was the girl who had spent her whole life trying to prove that she was good enough, and failing, again and again and again. That burnt turkey was not just a turkey. It was a symbol of every time I had tried and failed. Every time I had been exposed as an imposter. Every time I had been reminded that I was not born here, that I did not belong here, that I would never truly be American. I stood in the kitchen, smoke still curling around me, and I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. I wanted to pack my bags and go back to my home country and never face another oven again. But then, I heard footsteps behind me. Carol's footsteps. She had come to check on me. She was about to see the disaster. And I was about to die of shame. But the thing that happened next, the thing that made me cry, the thing that changed me, the thing that taught me the real meaning of Thanksgiving, well, that is for section 2. Because this story is not about the burn. It's about what happened after. And I promise you, the best part is coming. My first Thanksgiving, the invitation that terrified me. You have to understand something about my first Thanksgiving invitation. It was not just a dinner invitation.
It was a test.
A cultural exam. A moment that would determine whether I was truly accepted into this American family or whether I would forever be the foreign daughter-in-law who never quite fit in. At least, that is how it felt in my head. Carol had called me 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Her voice was warm and kind, the way American mothers are when they're about to ask you to do something impossible. "Honey," she said, "I was thinking, this year I want you to make the turkey." I almost dropped the phone. "The turkey?" I repeated. "The whole turkey?" "Well, yes," she laughed. "It's just one bird. Don't worry. I'll give you my recipe. It's simple." Simple. There was that word again. I wanted to say, "Carol, I am from a country where we do not eat turkey. We do not have Thanksgiving. We do not have ovens big enough for a bird the size of a small planet. I have never cooked anything larger than a chicken breast. And I am terrified." But I didn't say that, because I had been in America long enough to know that saying, "I can't," was not acceptable. Americans admire confidence. They admire people who say yes and figure things out later. They admire the spirit of "I'll try," even when trying is almost certainly going to end in disaster. So I took a deep breath. I swallowed my fear. And I said, "Of course, Carol. I would love to." Then I hung up the phone and immediately started crying. My husband, Mark, found me in the kitchen, sobbing over the sink. "What happened?" he asked, genuinely alarmed. "Is it your mother? Did something happen back home?" "Your mother," I sobbed. "She wants me to make the turkey." Mark stared at me like I had just told him the world was ending. "That's great," he said. "That means she trusts you." "I don't want her trust," I wailed. "I want her to make the turkey. She's been making it for 30 years. She knows how. I don't even know what a giblet is." Mark, bless his heart, tried to comfort me. "Babe, it's just a turkey. You put it in the oven. You wait a few hours.
Done."
He was so wrong. So confidently, adorably, dangerously wrong. Thanksgiving turkey is not just a food. It is a symbol, a ritual, a sacred object that has been passed down through generations of American families. The turkey is the centerpiece, the star of the show, the thing that everyone gathers around and talks about and judges and remembers. If you mess up the turkey, you have not just ruined a meal. You have ruined Thanksgiving. And Carol was giving that responsibility to me, the foreigner. The one who still pronounced turkey with a slight accent that made it sound like tikki. The one who had never celebrated this holiday in her life. To say I was scared would be an understatement. I was terrified. I was paralyzed. I was about to commit a crime against American culture. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were a blur of anxiety and preparation. I researched everything. I watched cooking shows obsessively. I learned words I had never needed before. Brine, carve, tent, resting time. I practiced on a small chicken, which turned out okay, which gave me a tiny spark of hope. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I could become the Thanksgiving hero. Then the turkey arrived. I had ordered it from a specialty store because I was too intimidated to pick one out at the supermarket. The delivery man handed me a cold, heavy plastic bag. I opened it, and there it was. 12 pounds of raw, pale, intimidating poultry. It looked like a science experiment. I had no idea what to do with it. I read Carol's recipe card for the 100th time. It was written in her neat cursive handwriting, with little notes in the margins. Don't overcook. Baste every 45 minutes. Remember, patience. The card was stained with old butter and years of love. It was a family heirloom, and I was about to desecrate it. I followed every instruction. I was so careful. I triple-checked the temperature. I set multiple timers. I even made a chart on a piece of paper to track the cooking process. I was like a scientist in a laboratory, except my experiment was a bird, and the stakes were my entire future in this family. And still, somehow, in the chaos of the day, the guests arriving, the children running around, the endless questions from Mark about whether the gravy was ready, I made a mistake. A tiny mistake. A mistake that I would replay in my head for years. I had misread the temperature. I had set the oven to 425 instead of 325. Just 2 digits. Just one tiny number. And that tiny number had turned my golden bird into a blackened monument to failure. The timer went off. I walked to the oven. I opened the door. Smoke poured out. It was not the gentle, aromatic steam of a well-cooked turkey. It was a thick, dark, chemical-smelling smoke. The kind of smoke that makes you cough. The kind of smoke that sets off fire alarms. The kind of smoke that tells you, without any doubt, that something has gone terribly wrong. I pulled out the roasting pan. The turkey was black. Not dark brown. Not a little charred. Black. The skin was so dark it was almost shiny, like obsidian. The legs were shriveled and hard, like pieces of petrified wood. The smell was not appetizing. It was the smell of regret. I set the pan on the counter and just stared. My mind went blank. All those hours of preparation. All that stress. All that hope. And this was the result. A burnt bird. A ruined Thanksgiving. A confirmation of every fear I had ever had about not belonging in this country. I could hear the guests in the dining room. They were laughing. They were talking. They had no idea that the main course was a crime scene. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to go back to my home country where I had never had to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. But I didn't run. Because at that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Carol's footsteps.
She had come to check on me.
She was going to see the disaster. And I was going to die of shame. But then something happened that I never expected. Something that would teach me more about love, failure, and being human than any perfect meal ever could. Something that turned the worst moment of my American life into the best. That story is coming in section 3. But before we get there, I want you to ask yourself this question. Have you ever been so afraid of failing that you almost didn't try? Have you ever hidden a mistake because you were too ashamed to show it? Have you ever believed that one error could destroy everything you've worked for? If yes, you are not alone. And you are about to find out why failure might be the best thing that ever happened to you. The American feast, a cultural ritual I didn't understand. Let me pause the story for a moment and explain something you need to know. Thanksgiving is not just a meal. It is a cultural ritual, a sacred American tradition. It is the one day of the year when families gather from across the country, travel for hours, squeeze around tables, and eat until they cannot move. It is about gratitude, yes, but it is also about food. And the food is not just food. The food is memory. The turkey, the stuffing, the cranberry sauce, the mashed potatoes, the gravy, the pumpkin pie, every single dish has a story. Every single dish has been made 100 times before by grandmothers and mothers and aunts who pass down their recipes like family secrets. The Thanksgiving table is a time machine. When you sit down at that table, you are not just eating. You are connecting with generations of Americans who came before you. You are participating in a tradition that is older than the country itself. And when you are the person responsible for the turkey, the centerpiece, the star, the thing everyone waits for, you are not just cooking. You are carrying the weight of that tradition on your shoulders. I didn't understand any of this when Carol asked me to make the turkey. I thought it was just a meal, a big dinner, a party. I didn't realize that I was being asked to join a lineage, to prove that I belonged not just in the family, but in the culture itself. That is why the burnt turkey hurt so much. It wasn't just burnt. It was a symbol of my failure to participate in this American tradition. It was proof, I thought, that I would never truly be one of them. So when Carol walked into the kitchen and saw the blackened bird, I prepared myself for the worst. I expected disappointment. I expected the polite, tight-lipped smile that Americans do when they are trying not to be rude. I expected to be quietly excluded from future Thanksgiving celebrations. I expected to be the foreign daughter-in-law who ruined the holiday. But Carol did not do any of those things. She walked up to the counter. She looked at the turkey. She looked at me. And then she did something that I still cannot fully explain. She started to laugh. Not a mean laugh. Not a mocking laugh. A genuine, surprised, belly-shaking laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from a place of true amusement. "Oh, honey," she said, wiping her eyes. "I have made so many bad turkeys in my life. So many."
Certa her. What?
"The first time I made Thanksgiving dinner," she said, "I was 24. I had just married your father-in-law. I wanted to impress his mother. So I made the turkey. And I forgot to take the bag of giblets out of the inside. I had no idea what giblets were. But I knew that forgetting them was apparently a crime. It was a disaster," Carol continued, laughing. "The turkey was full of plastic and paper. His mother never let me forget it. For years, she told everyone about the giblet turkey. I was speechless. This was not the reaction I had expected. My mother-in-law was laughing about her own failures. She was telling me that she had been in my shoes. She was showing me that failure was part of the tradition. And suddenly, I understood something I had never understood before. Thanksgiving is not about perfection. It is about vulnerability. It is about showing up, trying your best, and then laughing together when things go wrong. The burnt turkey was not a disaster. It was an opportunity to connect, an opportunity to be human, an opportunity to let my family see that I was not perfect and to let them love me anyway. Carol picked up a knife. She cut a small piece of the burnt turkey skin. She put it in her mouth, and she said something I will never forget. "See this? This is love. Burnt, messy, imperfect love. And it tastes just as sweet as the perfect stuff." Then she called out to the dining room. "Everyone, come to the kitchen. You have to see this." I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. But instead, my husband, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, and all my nieces and nephews came into the kitchen. They stood around the counter, looking at the blackened turkey. And then, one by one, they started to laugh. Not at me. With me. They told stories about their own Thanksgivings gone wrong. The year the gravy was too salty. The year the pie crust was raw. The year the dog stole the turkey while no one was looking. Every single person in that kitchen had a story of failure. And every single story was told with love. That was my first lesson in the real meaning of Thanksgiving. The turkey is not the point. The food is not the point. The point is sitting together, sharing our mistakes, and loving each other anyway. I learned something else that day too. Something about failure. I had spent my whole life trying to avoid failure. I had hidden my accent. I had hidden my mistakes. I had hidden my fears. I had pretended to be perfect because I believed that perfection was the price of belonging. But Carol showed me that the opposite was true. Belonging is not about being perfect. It is about being real. It is about letting people see your burnt turkey, your imperfect English, your messy, clumsy, human self, and letting them love you anyway. That is what I had been missing. That is what I had been too scared to give myself permission to do. After the laughter died down, Carol did something else. She took the burnt turkey, carved it anyway, and served it with a big smile. "This will be our favorite Thanksgiving story," she said, "for the rest of our lives." And she was right. That burnt turkey is still a legend in our family. Every Thanksgiving, someone brings it up. Remember the burnt turkey? And everyone laughs and remembers and tells the story again. The story of the foreign daughter-in-law who tried so hard and failed so spectacularly, and somehow, in that failure, became part of the family forever.
I want you to think about that.
What is the burnt turkey in your life? What is the thing you have tried to make perfect and failed? What is the mistake you have been hiding because you are afraid of being judged? What if you let someone see it? What if you let someone laugh with you instead of at you? What if your failure became your most cherished memory? That is what Thanksgiving taught me. That is what Carol taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. Your imperfections are not weaknesses. They are your entry point into connection. They are the thing that makes you real. They are the thing that makes you human. And they are the thing that will make people love you if you are brave enough to show them. In the next section, I will tell you about the secret recipe. The one Carol handed to me. The one that I had been so scared to follow. And I will show you what I finally understood about cooking, love, and the beautiful, messy art of being a stranger in a new country. The secret recipe, a handwritten heirloom that held generations of love. Let me tell you about that recipe card. The one Carol handed me with such reverence. It was not a fancy, printed, laminated thing. It was a small, cream-colored index card, soft from years of being handled. The edges were frayed. There was a coffee stain in the top right corner. The handwriting was Carol's neat cursive, but mixed in were notes in other handwriting, her mother's, her grandmother's, maybe even her great-grandmother's. Each generation had added something.
A tip.
A warning. A small adjustment. Add a little more sage if you like it, Herbie. Don't forget to let it rest before carving. This recipe was given to me by my mother on my wedding day. I held that card like it was made of glass. It was more than a recipe. It was a family heirloom. A document that connected generations of women who had stood in kitchens just like this one, wrestling with turkeys, hoping to create something beautiful for the people they loved. And Carol was giving it to me, a foreigner. A woman who had never even tasted a Thanksgiving turkey before she moved to America. A woman who still sometimes confused stuffing with staffing. That card was a gift of trust. And I was terrified of betraying it. But here is the thing about secret family recipes. They are not really about the ingredients. They are about the story, the love, the memory, the act of passing something down from one generation to the next. That is what I didn't understand when I stood in my kitchen, covered in flour, trying to decode Carol's handwriting. I thought the recipe was about cooking. It was about belonging. I had been in America for a few years by then. I had learned to say thank you and excuse me and have a nice day. I had learned to smile at strangers and make small talk about the weather. I had learned to navigate grocery stores and banks and post offices. But I had not yet learned how to belong. I had friends. I had a husband. I had a job. But underneath all of that, I still felt like an outsider. Someone who was performing American, but had not yet become one. The recipe card was Carol's way of saying, "You are not an outsider. You are family. You are one of us. Now take this tradition and make it your own." And I didn't understand that until much later. Until after the turkey was burnt. Until after Carol laughed and cut into the blackened bird. Until after she told me about the giblet disaster and the raw pie crust and the dog who stole the turkey. That recipe card was not about the perfect turkey. It was about the imperfect people who had been making it for generations. It was about the times it had gone wrong and the times it had gone right. It was about the laughter and the tears and the love that had been poured into every single bird. The recipe card was not a set of instructions. It was a permission slip.
Permission to try.
Permission to fail. Permission to be human. And I didn't realize that until Carol's laughter showed me. The night after Thanksgiving, I sat alone in my kitchen. The burnt turkey was in the trash. The dishes were done. The guests had gone home. I was tired and embarrassed and still processing everything that had happened. And I took out that recipe card. I looked at it under the kitchen light. I traced the handwriting with my finger. And I cried. Not from shame this time. From gratitude. Because I finally understood. Carol had not given me the recipe because she thought I would make a perfect turkey. She had given it to me because she wanted me to be part of the story. She wanted me to have my own Thanksgiving disaster to tell. She wanted me to join the lineage of imperfect women who had stood in kitchens and tried their best and failed sometimes and kept going anyway. That is the real secret of the recipe. It is not about the turkey. It is about the teller of the tale. The person who stands in the kitchen and says, "I made this. It's not perfect, but I made it for you." And in that moment, the person who receives it feels seen.
Loved.
Connected. That is what Carol gave me. Not a recipe. A connection. A place in the family story. A seat at the table. For the rest of my life, I will have the story of the burnt turkey. I will have the story of Carol laughing in the kitchen. I will have the story of cutting into that blackened bird and serving it anyway, because love does not require perfection. And every Thanksgiving, I tell that story. I tell it to my kids. I tell it to new friends. I tell it to anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to fail. That failure is not the end. That failure is just the beginning of the best story you will ever tell. So now, when I make Thanksgiving dinner, I don't worry about the turkey being perfect. I worry about it being real. I worry about the conversation around the table. I worry about the laughter and the love and the messy, imperfect, beautiful chaos of being human. And I think about Carol, about her recipe card, about the generations of women who came before her, about the generations of women who will come after me. The recipe card is not just a recipe. It is a thread that connects us all. A thread of love that stretches through time, through kitchens, through failures and triumphs, through burnt turkeys and golden ones. And I am part of that thread now, because Carol handed it to me, and I will hand it to my daughter someday. And I will tell her the story of the burnt turkey, and she will laugh, and she will make her own mistakes. And she will tell her own stories. And the thread will continue. That is the secret of Thanksgiving. That is the secret of family. That is the secret of love. It doesn't need to be perfect.
It just needs to keep going.
It just needs to be passed down. One generation. One story. One burnt turkey at a time. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the morning of the disaster. The morning I woke up at 5 a.m., full of hope and caffeine, ready to conquer the turkey. The morning that everything started to go wrong. But not in the way you think. Because the disaster was not the turkey. The disaster was my own fear. And the journey of that morning will teach you something about yourself that you might not want to hear, but need to hear anyway. The morning disaster, when hope met the oven of doom. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up at 4:47 a.m. Not because I had set an alarm. Because my body had decided that sleep was a luxury I no longer deserved. I lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark's gentle snoring. My heart was already pounding. My palms were already sweating. It was going to be a long day. I crept out of bed like a spy on a mission. The house was dark and cold. The kind of cold that makes you question why anyone would voluntarily live in a place where November feels like February. I padded to the kitchen in my slippers, wrapped in an old robe that had seen better days. I turned on the lights. I stared at the kitchen. And I realized that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. The turkey was in the fridge. 12 pounds of frozen potential catastrophe. I opened the fridge door and looked at it. It was wrapped in plastic, pale and cold. It didn't look like food. It looked like a science experiment. I took it out. It was heavy. So heavy. My arms ached just holding it. I put it in the sink. And then I just stood there, staring at it, waiting for it to tell me what to do.
It didn't tell me anything.
It just sat there being a turkey. I pulled out Carol's recipe card. I read it again, and again, and again. I had memorized it by now, but I was so scared of making a mistake that I needed to see the words with my own eyes. Step 1. Remove the turkey from the refrigerator and let it come to room temperature. Okay, I could do that. I left it in the sink and went to make coffee. That was the first thing I did right. The coffee was strong and black, the way I needed it to be. I drank it standing up, staring at the turkey, as if I could will it into being ready. Step 2. Preheat the oven to 325 degrees. I set the oven. I double-checked. I triple-checked. 325, not 425. I was going to get this right. Step 3. Remove the giblets from the cavity. I didn't know what giblets were. I had looked it up. They were the turkey's internal organs. The heart, the liver, the gizzard. I was supposed to reach inside the turkey and pull them out. I had to stick my hand into the cold, raw cavity of a dead bird and rummage around for its organs. I am not a squeamish person. I have changed diapers. I have cleaned up vomit. I have dealt with things that would make most people gag. But there was something deeply unsettling about reaching inside that turkey. The cavity was cold and slimy. The inside of the turkey felt like a cave. I reached in and felt something. A bag. A plastic bag. Thank God. I pulled it out. It was a small bag of giblets. I set it aside. I reached in again to check for anything else. Nothing. Just cold, empty space. I felt relieved. I had done it. I had removed the giblets. Step 4. Rinse the turkey inside and out. I ran water over the turkey. It was cold. My hands were numb. I dried it with paper towels. I patted it like a baby. Step 5. Season the turkey. Carol's recipe called for salt, pepper, sage, thyme, rosemary, and butter. I had prepared everything the night before. The herbs were chopped. The butter was softened. I mixed them together with my hands. The feeling was weird, buttery and herby and cold and slimy. I rubbed it all over the turkey, inside and out, every surface. I was thorough. I was careful. I was not going to mess this up. Step 6. Stuff the turkey. Carol's recipe said to fill the cavity with onions, celery, and garlic. I chopped them. I put them inside. I pushed them in until they were packed tight. The turkey was starting to look like a real turkey. A real, naked, buttered, stuffed turkey. Step 7. Truss the turkey. I had to watch a YouTube video 3 times to understand what this meant. You have to tie the legs together with kitchen twine. It keeps the turkey in a compact shape, so it cooks evenly. I tied the legs.
It looked okay.
Not beautiful, but okay. Step 8. Place the turkey in a roasting pan. I lifted the turkey. It was heavy. So heavy. My arms were trembling. I put it in the pan. It fit perfectly. Step 9. Place the turkey in the oven. I opened the oven door. The heat hit me in the face. I slid the roasting pan onto the middle rack. I closed the door. I set the timer. And I stood back. I had done it. I had prepared the turkey. I had followed every instruction. It was in the oven. There was nothing more I could do. I felt a wave of relief. And then the fear started to creep back in. What if I had forgotten something? What if the oven temperature was wrong? What if the turkey was too big? What if it didn't cook all the way? What if it dried out? What if? I took a deep breath. I reminded myself that I had followed the recipe. I had done everything right. The turkey would be fine. The turkey would be perfect. And for the next 4 hours, I pretended to be calm. I went through the motions of hosting. I set the table. I arranged the flowers. I made small talk. I refilled glasses. I smiled and laughed and pretended that everything was under control. But inside, I was a mess. Every 10 minutes, I glanced at the oven. I checked the timer. I peeked through the glass door at the turkey. It was browning. Beautifully.
Golden. Perfect.
I started to believe that I had actually done it. I had made a perfect Thanksgiving turkey. The first time. Without any help. I was a genius. I was a culinary prodigy. I was the best daughter-in-law in the history of daughter-in-laws. And then I made a mistake. A tiny mistake. A mistake that I would replay in my head for years. The timer went off. I walked to the oven. I opened the door. And smoke poured out. Not the gentle, aromatic steam of a well-cooked turkey. The thick, dark, chemical-smelling smoke of a bird that had been incinerated. I looked at the turkey. It was black. Not brown. Not golden. Black. The skin was so dark it looked like charcoal. The legs were shriveled and hard, like pieces of wood. The smell was not appetizing. It was the smell of burning. The smell of failure. I stood there, holding the oven door, staring at the blackened bird, my mind going completely blank. How had this happened? I had followed the recipe. I had set the temperature to 325. I had timed it perfectly. What went wrong? And then I looked at the oven dial, and I understood. In my nervousness, in my desperate attempt to be perfect, I had set the oven to 425, not 325. I had misread the dial. I had confused the numbers. A tiny mistake. One tiny, innocent, understandable mistake. And it had ruined everything. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the turkey out the window and run away from this country and never come back. But I didn't. Because at that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Carol's footsteps. She had come to check on me. She was about to see the disaster. And I was about to learn the most important lesson of my life. The oven panic, when my brain forgot how numbers work. Let me tell you something about panic. It is not like the movies. It is not a dramatic, slow-motion moment with orchestral music swelling in the background. Real panic is quiet. It is cold. It is the feeling of watching yourself make a mistake in slow motion while your brain screams, "No," and your body refuses to listen. That was me, standing in front of the oven, staring at the blackened turkey, realizing what I had done. 425. I had set it to 425, not 325. Two tiny numbers. 100 degrees of difference. 100 degrees of destruction. And I had done it because I was so nervous, so desperate to be perfect, so consumed by the fear of failure that I couldn't even read a dial correctly. That is the irony of fear. It makes you so afraid of making a mistake that you make the very mistake you were trying to avoid. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You worry so much about messing up that you mess up. You try so hard to be perfect that you become imperfect. You want so desperately to belong that you become the outsider. I had done it to myself. Not the turkey. Not Carol. Not America. Me. And in that moment, standing in front of that smoking oven, I realized something terrible. The burnt turkey was not the disaster. The disaster was my own fear. The turkey was just a symbol. A symbol of every time I had been too scared to try, too scared to speak, too scared to be myself. A symbol of every time I had hidden my accent, my mistakes, my real self. A symbol of the girl who said bitch instead of beach and then never spoke again. That girl was still inside me. She had been there all along, whispering in my ear, telling me I wasn't good enough. And on that Thanksgiving morning, she had finally won. I stood in the kitchen, holding the roasting pan, my hands trembling, my eyes burning with tears. The smoke was clearing. The turkey was a blackened monument to my failure, and I was about to be exposed as the fraud I had always feared I was. Then I heard the footsteps. Carol's footsteps. She was coming, and I wanted to die. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be anywhere but in that kitchen, holding that burnt bird, facing the woman who had trusted me with her family's recipe. But I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I was trapped. So I did the only thing I could do. I turned around and faced her. Carol walked into the kitchen. She was wearing a beautiful apron with little turkeys on it. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her smile was bright and warm. She was the picture of a confident American mother, ready to enjoy a perfect Thanksgiving dinner. And then she saw the turkey. She stopped. She stared. For one long, horrible moment, she didn't say anything. The silence was worse than anything she could have said. I braced myself for the disappointment, the pity, the polite, tight-lipped smile that Americans do when they are trying not to be rude. I braced myself to be quietly excluded from future Thanksgiving celebrations. I braced myself to be the foreign daughter-in-law who ruined the holiday. But Carol didn't do any of those things. She walked up to the counter. She looked at the turkey. She looked at me. And then she started to laugh. Not a mean laugh. Not a mocking laugh. A genuine, surprised, belly-shaking laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from a place of true amusement. "Oh, honey," she said, wiping her eyes. "I have made so many bad turkeys in my life. So many."
Certa her. What?
"The first time I made Thanksgiving dinner," she said, "I was 24. I had just married your father-in-law. I wanted to impress his mother. So I made the turkey. And I forgot to take the bag of giblets out of the inside. I had no idea what giblets were. But I knew that forgetting them was apparently a crime. It was a disaster," Carol continued, laughing. "The turkey was full of plastic and paper. His mother never let me forget it. For years, she told everyone about the giblet turkey. I was speechless. This was not the reaction I had expected. My mother-in-law was laughing about her own failures. She was telling me that she had been in my shoes. She was showing me that failure was part of the tradition. And suddenly, I understood something I had never understood before. Thanksgiving is not about perfection. It is about vulnerability. It is about showing up, trying your best, and then laughing together when things go wrong. The burnt turkey was not a disaster. It was an opportunity to connect, an opportunity to be human, an opportunity to let my family see that I was not perfect, and to let them love me anyway. Carol picked up a knife. She cut a small piece of the burnt turkey skin. She put it in her mouth, and she said something I will never forget. "See this? This is love. Burnt, messy, imperfect love. And it tastes just as sweet as the perfect stuff." Then she called out to the dining room. "Everyone, come to the kitchen. You have to see this." I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. But instead, my husband, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, and all my nieces and nephews came into the kitchen. They stood around the counter, looking at the blackened turkey. And then, one by one, they started to laugh. Not at me. With me. They told stories about their own Thanksgivings gone wrong. The year the gravy was too salty. The year the pie crust was raw. The year the dog stole the turkey while no one was looking. Every single person in that kitchen had a story of failure. And every single story was told with love. That was my first lesson in the real meaning of Thanksgiving. The turkey is not the point. The food is not the point. The point is sitting together, sharing our mistakes, and loving each other anyway. I learned something else that day too. Something about failure. I had spent my whole life trying to avoid failure. I had hidden my accent. I had hidden my mistakes. I had hidden my fears. I had pretended to be perfect because I believed that perfection was the price of belonging. But Carol showed me that the opposite was true. Belonging is not about being perfect. It is about being real. It is about letting people see your burnt turkey, your imperfect English, your messy, clumsy, human self, and letting them love you anyway. That is what I had been missing. That is what I had been too scared to give myself permission to do. After the laughter died down, Carol did something else. She took the burnt turkey, carved it anyway, and served it with a big smile. "This will be our favorite Thanksgiving story," she said, "for the rest of our lives." And she was right. That burnt turkey is still a legend in our family. Every Thanksgiving, someone brings it up. "Remember the burnt turkey?" And everyone laughs and remembers and tells the story again. The story of the foreign daughter-in-law who tried so hard and failed so spectacularly, and somehow, in that failure, became part of the family forever.
I want you to think about that.
What is the burnt turkey in your life? What is the thing you have tried to make perfect and failed? What is the mistake you have been hiding because you are afraid of being judged? What if you let someone see it? What if you let someone laugh with you instead of at you? What if your failure became your most cherished memory? That is what Thanksgiving taught me. That is what Carol taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. Your imperfections are not weaknesses. They are your entry point into connection. They are the thing that makes you real. They are the thing that makes you human. And they are the thing that will make people love you if you are brave enough to show them. In the next section, I will tell you about the moment Carol cut into that burnt turkey and served it to the family. The moment that changed everything. The moment I finally understood what it means to belong. The burnt bird, when failure became the main course. Let me describe the turkey one more time. Not because I want to relive the humiliation, but because I want you to see it the way I saw it. The skin was not just black. It was the color of a burnt match. The texture was not just crispy. It was hard, like a shell you would have to crack with a hammer. The legs were shriveled and twisted, pointing up at the ceiling like a dying insect. The smell was not entirely unpleasant. It smelled vaguely like a campfire, but not the kind of campfire where you roast marshmallows. The kind of campfire where you burn your entire camping gear and have to hike out in the dark. That was my turkey. That was the centerpiece of my first Thanksgiving as an American wife. And the entire family was now gathered around it, laughing. Carol had called them all in. "Everyone, come to the kitchen. You have to see this." And they had come. All of them. Mark, my husband, who was trying very hard to look supportive while also not making eye contact with the turkey. My father-in-law, Bob, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, but who was now grinning from ear to ear. My sister-in-law, Sarah, who had been a little distant with me since I married her brother, but who was now laughing so hard she was holding onto the counter for support. And the kids. 4 of them, ranging from 6 to 12. All of them staring at the blackened bird like it was the most fascinating thing they had ever seen. "Is that what Thanksgiving turkey looks like?" one of them asked. "No, honey," Carol said, still laughing. "That is what love looks like." I wanted to crawl under the table and never come out. But I couldn't, because Carol was still holding the knife, and she was about to carve that bird. "Carol, please," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't. It's ruined. It's completely ruined." "Ruined?" Carol said, raising an eyebrow. "This isn't ruined. This is a story. And stories are never ruined. They're just waiting to be told." She turned to the family. "Does everyone remember the year I forgot to take the giblets out?" A chorus of laughter. The turkey was full of plastic, Bob said, shaking his head. We had to order pizza. Pizza on Thanksgiving, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. Mom was so embarrassed. I was not embarrassed, Carol said, pointing the knife at Sarah. I was mortified. There's a difference. More laughter. And remember the year the dog stole the turkey? Mark said. That was my fault, Bob admitted. I left the kitchen door open. The dog was a hero for about 30 seconds. He ate the entire turkey, Carol said. 12 pounds of turkey.
He was sick for a week.
Worth it, Bob said. And everyone laughed again. I stood there, watching my new family laugh about their Thanksgiving disasters. And I realized something. These people were not perfect. They were not the picture-perfect American family I had imagined. They were messy, chaotic, and full of failures, just like me. And that was what made them family. Carol finally started carving the turkey. It was not easy. The knife had to saw through the burnt skin. The meat underneath was surprisingly white, but it was dry.
So dry.
Carol put a slice on a plate. She took a bite, and she closed her eyes.
She said.
Perfect, Carol. You don't have to lie, I said. I'm not lying, she said, opening her eyes. This is the best turkey I've ever had.
It's burnt, I said.
It's dry. It's made with love, Carol interrupted. And that is the only ingredient that matters. She handed me a slice. Try it. I took a bite. It was not good. It was dry, tough, and tasted faintly of smoke. But it was also the most delicious thing I had ever eaten, because it was not just turkey. It was acceptance. It was belonging. It was the taste of a family telling me, you are one of us. Imperfections and all. We brought the turkey to the table. We served it with all the other dishes, the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the green bean casserole, the pumpkin pie. And we ate. The turkey was terrible. Everyone knew it. But no one said a word. Instead, they told more stories. Stories of other failures. Other disasters. Other moments when things had gone wrong, and they had laughed anyway. And I realized that this was the real tradition. Not the turkey. Not the recipes. Not the perfect table settings. The tradition was showing up, making mistakes, and loving each other anyway. That was the gift Carol had given me. Not a recipe. A permission slip. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to fail. Permission to belong. After dinner, I helped Carol do the dishes. She was washing. I was drying. Thank you, I said quietly.
For what? She asked.
For not being disappointed. For not being angry. For laughing instead of yelling. Carol stopped washing. She turned to look at me. Honey, she said, do you know why I asked you to make the turkey? To test me? I guessed. To see if I was good enough for your son? Carol laughed.
No, she said.
I asked you because I wanted to see you fail.
What?
I wanted to see how you would handle it, she said. Life is full of failures. Big ones. Small ones. The turkey is just a turkey. But how you react to failure, that tells me everything I need to know about who you are. And what did you learn? I asked, my voice small. Carol smiled. I learned that you are brave enough to try, and that you are humble enough to ask for help, and that you are strong enough to laugh at yourself. Those are the qualities of a true member of this family. I started crying. Not from shame this time. From gratitude. Because Carol had just given me something I had been searching for my whole life. Permission to be human. That night, I went home with a full stomach and a full heart. I also went home with a new understanding of failure. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of success. A necessary part. Without failure, there can be no growth. No learning. No connection. And when you share your failures with the people you love, you give them permission to share theirs. And that is how families become strong. That is how communities form. That is how belonging happens. The burnt turkey was not a disaster. It was the best thing that ever happened to me because it taught me what it really means to belong. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the silent table. The moment we all sat down to eat that terrible, beautiful, burnt turkey. The moment I realized that love is not about perfection. It's about showing up. Even when you're burnt. Even when you're broken. Even when you think you have failed. Because that is when love shows up too. The silent table. When love was served with burnt turkey. We all sat down at the table. The dining room was beautiful. Carol had decorated it with autumn leaves, small pumpkins, and candles that flickered warmly. The plates were china. The glasses were crystal. The silverware was polished and gleaming. It was the kind of table you see in magazines. The kind of table that says, "This is a family that has its act together." And in the center of that perfect table, surrounded by all that beauty, sat the burned turkey. Black. Crispy. Shriveled. It looked like a prop from a horror movie. I wanted to hide under the tablecloth. Instead, I sat in my chair, my hands in my lap, my face burning with shame. I could not look at anyone. I could not speak. I just stared at the turkey and waited for the judgment to come. But the judgment did not come. Instead, something else happened. Something I had never expected. The table went quiet. Not the awkward, uncomfortable kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one wants to say it. And then, Mark broke the silence. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking. This turkey looks exactly like the one I made in college." I looked up. "You made a turkey in college?" "I tried," he said. "It was for a Friendsgiving. I didn't know what I was doing. I put it in the oven and forgot about it for 6 hours. When I opened the door, it was smoking. The fire alarm went off. The whole building had to evacuate. Everyone laughed."
"That's nothing," Bob said.
"Remember the year I tried to deep fry a turkey?" "Oh no," Carol said, shaking her head. "That was a disaster." "I didn't know you had to dry it first," Bob said. "So I put a wet turkey in hot oil. And it exploded." "Exploded?" I said. "It exploded," Bob confirmed. Oil went everywhere. The deck caught on fire. The fire department came. They had to use a fire extinguisher on my Thanksgiving turkey. The table erupted in laughter. I found myself laughing too. Not because the story was funny, though it was. Because I realized that I was not alone. Every single person at that table had failed at Thanksgiving at some point. Every single person had made mistakes, had disasters, had moments they wanted to forget. And they were all still here. Still laughing. Still together. Still family. "That's nothing," Sarah said. "The year I was 22, I thought I could make a vegan turkey. I had no idea what I was doing. I made something out of seitan and lentils. It looked like a brick. It tasted like a brick. My then boyfriend broke up with me the next day." "He broke up with you because of a turkey?" I asked. "He said it was because of the turkey," Sarah said. "But I think it was because I was a terrible cook." More laughter. And then Carol raised her glass. She tapped it with a knife to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," she said. Everyone raised their glasses. "To the burnt turkey," Carol said. "And to the person who made it. Because she didn't just cook a meal today. She showed us something more important. She showed us courage. She showed us vulnerability. She showed us that love is not about being perfect. Love is about showing up, trying your best, and letting people see you, even when you are burned, even when you are broken, even when you think you have failed." She looked at me. "To Anna," she said. "To the burnt turkey." and to the love that will always be stronger than any mistake. Everyone raised their glasses.
To Anna,
They said in unison. I was crying. Again. But this time, the tears were different. They were not tears of shame. They were tears of gratitude, of belonging, of finally, after all these years, being seen. We ate the turkey.
It was dry.
It was tough. It was smoky and a little bitter. But it was the best meal I had ever eaten, because it was served with love. Not perfect love. Not ideal love. Real love. The kind of love that shows up when you are at your worst and says, I see you. I accept you. I love you anyway. And that night, I learned something about America. About this country that I had been so desperate to belong to. The secret of America is not about being perfect. It is about being human. It is about trying, failing, trying again, and laughing together through it all. That is the real American dream. Not wealth. Not success. Not perfection. Belonging. Connection. The courage to be imperfect and the grace to accept imperfection in others.
Carol taught me that.
The burnt turkey taught me that. And now, I am teaching it to you. Because if you are watching this video, you are probably in the middle of your own burnt turkey. Your own failure. Your own moment of shame. Maybe it is your English. Maybe it is your accent. Maybe it is a mistake you made at work. Maybe it is a relationship that is struggling. Maybe it is a dream that seems impossible. Whatever it is, I want you to know something. It is not the end. It is the beginning. The burnt turkey is not the end of Thanksgiving. It is the best story. The thing everyone remembers. The thing that makes you part of the family. The thing that makes you human. So, I want you to look at your burnt turkey. I want you to look at it and say, this is not a failure. This is a story. And I am the hero of the story. Because you are. You are the hero. Not because you are perfect. Because you keep showing up. Because you keep trying. Because you keep loving, even when it hurts, even when you fail, even when you want to give up. That is what makes you brave. That is what makes you belong. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the unexpected grace. The moment Carol cut into that burnt turkey and served it to the family. The moment I finally understood what love really means. The unexpected grace, when Carol showed me the real meaning of love. You know that moment when you are so sure something terrible is about to happen, and then the opposite happens? The moment when you brace yourself for a slap and receive a hug instead? That was the moment Carol cut into the burnt turkey. She had called everyone to the kitchen. She had laughed at the blackened bird. She had told stories about her own failures. And then, she did something I never expected. She picked up a knife. She sliced into the turkey. She put a piece on a plate. And she took a bite. The room went silent. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her reaction. And then, she closed her eyes. She chewed slowly. She swallowed. And she said, this is the best turkey I have ever had.
Ist sehr daher.
Carol, you don't have to lie. I'm not lying, she said, opening her eyes. This is the best turkey I have ever had. Not because it is the juiciest. Not because it is the most flavorful. Because it is the most honest. It is the turkey of someone who tried. Someone who cared. Someone who loved enough to risk failure. And that is the only kind of turkey that matters. I started to cry. Not from shame. From gratitude. Because Carol had just given me something I had been searching for my whole life. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to fail. Permission to be loved anyway. She handed me a slice of the turkey.
Try it, she said.
I took a bite. It was not good.
It was dry.
It was tough. It was smoky and a little bitter. But it was also the most delicious thing I had ever eaten. Because it was not just turkey. It was acceptance. It was belonging. It was the taste of a family telling me, "You are one of us." Imperfections and all. We took the turkey to the table. We served it with all the other dishes, the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the green bean casserole, the pumpkin pie. And we ate. The turkey was terrible. Everyone knew it. But no one said a word. Instead, they told more stories. Stories of other failures, other disasters, other moments when things had gone wrong and they had laughed anyway. And I realized that this was the real tradition. Not the turkey, not the recipes, not the perfect table settings. The tradition was showing up, making mistakes, and loving each other anyway. That was the gift Carol had given me. Not a recipe. A permission slip. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to fail. Permission to belong. After dinner, I helped Carol do the dishes. She was washing. I was drying. "Thank you," I said quietly.
For what? She asked.
For not being disappointed. For not being angry. For laughing instead of yelling. Carol stopped washing. She turned to look at me. "Honey," she said, "do you know why I asked you to make the turkey?" To test me? I guessed. To see if I was good enough for your son? Carol laughed.
"No," she said.
"I asked you because I wanted to see you fail."
What?
"I wanted to see how you would handle it," she said. "Life is full of failures. Big ones. Small ones. The turkey is just a turkey. But how you react to failure, that tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "And what did you learn?" I asked, my voice small. Carol smiled. "I learned that you are brave enough to try, and that you are humble enough to ask for help, and that you are strong enough to laugh at yourself. Those are the qualities of a true member of this family." I started crying again. Not from shame. From gratitude. Because Carol had just given me something I had been searching for my whole life. Permission to be human. That night, I went home with a full stomach and a full heart. I also went home with a new understanding of failure. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of success. A necessary part. Without failure, there can be no growth. No learning. No connection. And when you share your failures with the people you love, you give them permission to share theirs. And that is how families become strong. That is how communities form. That is how belonging happens. The burnt turkey was not a disaster. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it taught me what it really means to belong. I learned something else that night too. Something about love. Real love. The kind of love that Carol had for her family. The kind of love that Mark had for me. The kind of love that I was starting to feel for this strange, wonderful, imperfect country that had become my home. Love is not about perfection. It is about showing up. It is about trying. It is about failing and getting back up again. It is about laughing together when everything goes wrong. It is about carving a burnt turkey and serving it with a smile. That is what Carol taught me. That is what Thanksgiving taught me. That is what America taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. So whatever your burnt turkey is, whatever failure, whatever mistake, whatever moment of shame you are carrying, I want you to know something.
It is not the end.
It is the beginning. The burnt turkey is not the end of Thanksgiving. It is the best story. The thing everyone remembers. The thing that makes you part of the family. The thing that makes you human. So, I want you to look at your burnt turkey. I want you to look at it and say, this is not a failure. This is a story. And I am the hero of this story. Because you are. You are the hero. Not because you are perfect. Because you keep showing up. Because you keep trying. Because you keep loving. Even when it hurts. Even when you fail. Even when you want to give up. That is what makes you brave. That is what makes you belong. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the family laugh. The moment when everyone started sharing their own stories of failure. The moment I realized that I was not alone. And the moment I finally understood what it means to be part of a family. The family laugh, when stories of failure became our greatest treasure. You know what happened next? The table exploded. Not literally. But the silence that had followed Carol's toast exploded into a cascade of stories. Everyone wanted to share their own Thanksgiving disaster. It was like Carol had opened a floodgate. And suddenly, the burnt turkey was not the center of attention anymore. The stories were. Sarah went first. "Remember the year I tried to make homemade cranberry sauce?" she said. "I used the wrong sugar. I used salt instead of sugar. I didn't realize until I tasted it, and my face literally curled up like a dried apricot." "I remember," Bob said, laughing. "You made everyone try it. You said, 'It's not that bad.' And then everyone spit it out." "I was trying to be a good hostess," Sarah said, shaking her head. "Instead, I was the worst hostess in history." "That's nothing," Mark said. "Remember the year I forgot to turn on the oven?"
What?
I said. "I put the turkey in the oven," Mark said, "and I thought I had turned it on. But I had just turned on the light. For hours later, I opened the door, and the turkey was still raw. Completely raw. The inside was still frozen." Everyone burst out laughing. "We had to order Chinese food," Carol said, wiping her eyes. "That's not a Thanksgiving disaster," Bob said. "That's a family tradition." "The worst Thanksgiving I ever had," Carol said, "was the year I tried to make a vegan Thanksgiving for Sarah's new boyfriend. He was a vegan. I wanted to impress him. I made a lentil loaf, tofu turkey, and vegan gravy." "How did it turn out?" I asked. Carol sighed. "It was terrible. The lentil loaf was dry. The tofu turkey was bland. The gravy was watery." "And he broke up with Sarah the next day." "He broke up with you because of the meal?" I asked. "He broke up with me because he was a jerk," Sarah said. "But the meal didn't help." More laughter. And then Bob told a story. The story of the deep-fried turkey that exploded. The story of the fire department. The story of the deck that had to be rebuilt. "That was the most expensive turkey I ever bought," Bob said. "It cost me $2,000 in deck repairs." "But the story was worth it," Carol said. "It's still our favorite Thanksgiving story." "I thought the burnt turkey was our favorite Thanksgiving story," I said, smiling. Carol looked at me. "Now we have two favorites," she said. And then everyone started telling more stories. Stories of burned pies. Stories of salty gravies. Stories of dogs who stole turkeys. Stories of kids who refused to eat anything. Stories of families who argued and then made up. Stories of love, loss, and laughter. And I realized something. This was the real Thanksgiving. Not the perfect table. Not the perfect food. Not the perfect family. The stories. The shared memories. The laughter. The connection. That was what made Thanksgiving special. That was what made family. And I was part of it now. Because I had my own story. The story of the burnt turkey. The story of Carol's laughter. The story of the family that accepted me despite my failure. I had a place at the table. I had a place in the family. I had a place in the stories. That night, I went home with a full heart. I went home with a new understanding of what it means to belong. Belonging is not about being perfect. It is about being real. It is about showing up, making mistakes, and letting people love you anyway. It is about laughing together when things go wrong. It is about telling stories of failure and turning them into treasures. That is what Carol taught me. That is what Thanksgiving taught me. That is what America taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. Because if you are watching this video, you are probably in the middle of your own burnt turkey, your own failure, your own moment of shame. Maybe it is your English. Maybe it is your accent. Maybe it is a mistake you made at work. Maybe it is a relationship that is struggling. Maybe it is a dream that seems impossible. Whatever it is, I want you to know something. It is not the end. It is the beginning. The burnt turkey is not the end of Thanksgiving. It is the best story. The thing everyone remembers. The thing that makes you part of the family. The thing that makes you human. So, I want you to look at your burnt turkey. I want you to look at it and say, this is not a failure. This is a story. And I am the hero of this story. Because you are. You are the hero. Not because you are perfect. Because you keep showing up. Because you keep trying. Because you keep loving, even when it hurts, even when you fail, even when you want to give up. That is what makes you brave. That is what makes you belong. And that is what I want you to remember. The next time you make a mistake, don't hide. Don't run. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Instead, tell the story. Tell the story of your burnt turkey. Laugh at it. Share it with the people you love. Because that is how you turn failure into connection. That is how you turn shame into strength. That is how you turn a burnt turkey into a family legend. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the lesson of Thanksgiving. The real lesson. The one that Carol taught me. The one that changed my life forever. And I promise you, it will change yours too. The lesson of Thanksgiving. What the burnt bird taught me about belonging. The night after Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The turkey, the smoke, the laughter, the stories, Carol's words. And slowly, like a sunrise, a new understanding began to dawn on me. I had been thinking about Thanksgiving all wrong. For weeks, I had been treating it like a test, a performance, something I had to get right to prove that I belonged. But that wasn't what Thanksgiving was about. It was never about being perfect. It was about being present. It was about showing up with all your imperfections and letting people love you anyway. That was the lesson. That was the gift. And I had almost missed it because I was so focused on being perfect. I thought about Carol, about her laughter, about her stories. She hadn't asked me to make the turkey because she wanted a perfect bird. She had asked me because she wanted to include me. She wanted me to be part of the tradition. She wanted me to have a story to tell. She wanted me to belong. And I had almost thrown that gift away because I was too scared to fail. I thought about all the other times I had done that. The times I had hidden my accent. The times I had stayed silent in meetings. The times I had avoided making friends because I was afraid my English wasn't good enough. The times I had tried so hard to be perfect that I had forgotten to be real. That was the real failure. Not the burnt turkey. Not the mispronounced words. Not the frozen moments at the bank counter. The real failure was hiding. The real failure was pretending. The real failure was believing that I had to be perfect to be loved. I got out of bed. I walked to the kitchen. I sat down at the table where I had prepared that terrible, wonderful turkey. And I started to write. I wrote about the burnt turkey. I wrote about Carol's laughter. I wrote about the family stories. I wrote about what it meant to belong. And as I wrote, I realized something. This was the story I had been looking for. Not the perfect Thanksgiving story. The real Thanksgiving story. The story of someone who tried, failed, and was loved anyway. The story of a family that laughed together instead of judging. The story of belonging that came not from being perfect, but from being real. I thought about what Carol had said. This is the best turkey I've ever had. Not because it is the juiciest. Not because it is the most flavorful.
Because it is the most honest.
That was it. That was the secret. Honesty. Authenticity. The courage to be imperfect. The willingness to show up, make mistakes, and let people see you anyway. That is what Thanksgiving taught me. That is what Carol taught me. That is what America taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. Because if you are watching this video, I know something about you. I know you have felt like a failure. I know you have made mistakes. I know you have hidden your imperfections because you are afraid of being judged. I know you have tried to be perfect and failed. I know because I have been there. I have lived that fear. I have worn that mask. And I know how exhausting it is to pretend. So let me tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be fluent. You don't have to be flawless. You just have to be real. You just have to show up. You just have to try. And when you fail, when you burn the turkey, when you mispronounce the word, when you freeze at the bank counter, you just have to laugh, tell the story, and keep going. Because the people who love you, the people who matter, they don't love you because you are perfect. They love you because you are real. They love you because you try. They love you because you show up, even when you are scared, even when you are broken, even when you think you have failed. That is what Carol taught me. That is what the burnt turkey taught me. That is what I want to teach you. So, here is my challenge to you. The next time you make a mistake, don't hide. Don't run. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Instead, tell the story. Laugh at it. Share it with the people you love. And watch what happens. They won't judge you. They won't reject you. They will laugh with you. They will share their own stories. They will love you more. Because that is what connection looks like. That is what belonging looks like. That is what love looks like. It is not perfect. It is messy. It is real. It is a burnt turkey that becomes a family legend. So let me ask you something. What is your burnt turkey? What is the thing you have been hiding? What is the mistake you have been too ashamed to share? What is the story that, if you told it, would make you feel free?
I want you to think about it.
I want you to find the courage to share it, because that is how you belong. That is how you connect. That is how you become part of something bigger than yourself. And that is the real lesson of Thanksgiving. In the final section, section 12, I am going to bring this story to a close. I am going to tell you what happened next. How the burnt turkey changed my life. How I stopped hiding. How I finally found my voice. And I am going to leave you with a question that I hope will stay with you long after this video ends. Don't go anywhere. The best is coming. Burnt turkey, full heart. How the blackened bird became my greatest gift. That Thanksgiving changed me. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But slowly, like a wound healing from the inside out. The burnt turkey became a symbol. Not of failure. Of freedom. Because once I had burned the turkey and survived, once I had laughed with my family about it, once I had told the story and seen their eyes light up with recognition and love, I realized something. I no longer had to be perfect. I had been given permission to be human. And that permission changed everything. The weeks after Thanksgiving, I noticed a shift inside me. A quiet, subtle change. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head before I had them. I stopped apologizing for my accent. I stopped hiding in the background at parties. I started speaking up in meetings. I started making jokes. I started being myself. Not because I was suddenly confident, because I had finally understood that confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to be imperfect anyway. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be perfect. All the hours I had spent practicing pronunciation. All the nights I had lain awake worrying about mistakes I had made. All the conversations I had avoided because I was afraid of sounding stupid. And I realized that the fear itself had been the real problem. Not the accent. Not the grammar. Not the mistakes. The fear of making them. The fear of being seen. The fear of being judged. And Carol had given me the antidote to that fear. Not by telling me to be brave. By showing me that failure was not something to hide. It was something to share. I started applying that lesson to my English. I started making mistakes on purpose, not to be careless, to be free. I would say a word wrong and then laugh at myself. I would pause to find the right word and then say, "Sorry, my English is not perfect today." And you know what happened? People smiled. They relaxed. They shared their own mistakes. They told me about the time they had said something embarrassing in a language they were learning. They told me about their own insecurities. They connected with me, not despite my mistakes, because of them. That is the secret I wish I had known from day one. Imperfection is not a barrier to connection. It is the bridge. It is the thing that makes you approachable. It is the thing that makes you real. It is the thing that makes people want to be around you. And I had spent years hiding the very thing that could have brought me closer to others. That Thanksgiving taught me something else too. Something about belonging. I had spent so long trying to prove that I was American enough. That I belonged in this country. That I was worthy of being here. But belonging is not something you prove. It is something you receive. It is something you accept. Carol had given me belonging. Not because I had earned it. Because she had chosen to give it. She had chosen to see me as family. She had chosen to laugh with me instead of judging me. She had chosen to love me despite my imperfections. And I had almost missed it because I was too busy trying to be perfect to notice. So here is what I want you to take away from this story. Your burnt turkey, whatever it is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the beginning of your real story. The story of someone who tried, failed, and was loved anyway. The story of someone who showed up, made mistakes, and let people see them anyway. The story of someone who finally understood that perfection is not the price of belonging. It is the obstacle to it. I look back at that burnt turkey now and I smile. I don't cringe. I don't feel shame. I feel gratitude. Because that blackened bird was the best thing that ever happened to me. It taught me to stop hiding. It taught me to stop pretending. It taught me to stop being afraid of my own imperfection. And it gave me the greatest gift of all, permission to be human. So, I want to ask you a question. The question that I have been asking myself ever since that Thanksgiving. The question that I hope will stay with you long after this video ends. What is your burnt turkey? What is the thing you have been hiding? What is the mistake you have been too ashamed to share? What is the story that, if you told it, would make you feel free?
I want you to think about it.
I want you to find the courage to share it, because that is how you belong. That is how you connect. That is how you become part of something bigger than yourself. And that is the real lesson of the story. Not the turkey. Not the mistake. The courage to be imperfect. The courage to be real. The courage to let people see you, even when you are burned, even when you are broken, even when you think you have failed. That is what makes you human. That is what makes you loved. And that is what makes you belong. So here is my final challenge to you. The next time you make a mistake in English, don't apologize. Don't hide. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Instead, laugh. Tell the story. Share the failure. And watch what happens. People won't judge you. They will connect with you. They will share their own stories. They will love you more. Because that is what connection looks like. That is what belonging looks like. That is what love looks like. It is not perfect. It is messy. It is real. It is a burnt turkey that becomes a family legend. And it is yours for the taking. So go.
Speak.
Make mistakes. Burn the turkey.
Tell the story.
And know that you are not alone. You are not a failure. You are not an outsider. You are a human being doing your best, and that is enough. That is always enough. The burnt bird that taught me everything. You just watched a woman burn a Thanksgiving turkey so badly it looked like charcoal, and then discover that failure was the greatest gift she ever received. That blackened bird didn't ruin her holiday. It gave her a story, a family legend, a permission slip to be imperfect. But here's the part one didn't tell you. That burnt turkey wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was the beginning of something I never expected. In my next video, I'm going to show you how the same lesson, the courage to fail, completely transformed my English. How I stopped hiding my accent and started speaking with freedom. You won't believe what happened when I finally let myself be imperfect. So here's your call to action. Subscribe now, because the best stories are the ones where we fail together. Comment one word, burnt, if you're ready to stop hiding your mistakes. Like this video if you believe imperfection is the bridge to connection. This channel is not about flawless English. It's about real people, real stories, and the beautiful mess of learning, one burnt turkey at a time. Your imperfect voice is your greatest gift.
See you in the next video.